I'm Patrick Corelchi.
And I'm Adriana Cortez, and we're the hosts of Red Pilled America, a new storytelling podcast.
Red Pilled America tells you the stories Hollywood and the mainstream media don't want you to hear. Visit the iHeartRadio app right now to listen to Red Pilled America.
This is a News Radio 840 WHAS Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana, presented by KCC Heating and Cooling.
Wow. And it's a conversation that Kentucky is having. It's a conversation the whole nation has been having. A lot of states have already legalized it. And now there's a couple of bills in the state legislature that are, well, they sort of working their way through. They may hit some snags. We'll talk more about that later tonight. I am Leland Conway alongside Dave Jennings, Tony Vanetti, Dwight Witten, and we've got some special guests in tonight that are going to be, I think, really educational for people. They're going to tell us about the advantages, disadvantages. We've even got a doctor in the house we're going to talk to in just a minute, and kind of get the ball rolling on this conversation. There is what is most interesting to me, and guys, I'll kind of bring you into the conversation here, is the overwhelming poll support for medical marijuana in the state of Kentucky. I've seen polls from 70 to 80%, maybe even as high as 85, that people are really thinking maybe it's time we not put people in jail who are dealing with chronic illnesses, and their big sin is they're taking perhaps some sort of medical marijuana versus legally prescribed opioids that are putting thousands of Kentuckians into addiction programs.
This is another issue, guys. We talk about Kentucky as, well, at least there's Mississippi. Well, we're not quite there yet. About 33 states have done this, approved medical marijuana, and the District of Columbia. So we're firmly in the middle. If we can get Kentucky at least into the adoptive middle, we're making progress, but we have some work to do.
I think there are very few topics that we can get across the board, not across the board support, but it's getting close. I think back when we were talking about the lottery 25 years ago, weren't we, sort of all of us were like, well, yeah, let's do that. And it's been kind of fun, hasn't it? The lottery's been kind of fun since we did that. I don't know why we didn't have the lottery before, but now we do. It reminds me of that issue because now every state has the lottery, right?
Well, so, and I can remember when that debate was going on, the apocalypse was going to happen if we had it.
Right.
And I'm still waiting for the apocalypse. That didn't happen.
No,
so
it's kind of helped out a lot. It's been fun to play. So I wonder when we'll get over the hump and when that will be let's get it done. You talk about overwhelming support. The poll numbers are in. Look, we can't get our Kentuckians or anyone in America to agree on anything. And this is as close as you can get to that. So we'll see how it goes.
And I want to find out what the big holdup is, Leland, because like you said, there's a poll out that up to 85% of the people are looking for legalization of medical marijuana. You go to your doctor, you got an ACL, torn ACL, you're going to get opioids, even up to toothaches. And we all know what path opioids run down. They cut you off, and then look at the heroin problem, look at the pill problem we have now. I think that medical marijuana, no doubt it's responsible legislation, and I think we need to shine a light on whoever it is holding it up.
Yeah, we just might do that.
And find out why. I think Senator Seum will join us at the bottom of the hour, and maybe he could give us some insight. I don't know. But Dr. Patrick Murphy's here with us right now.
Well, and I want to introduce that being our first guest here, Dr. James Patrick Murphy. He's a clinical professor at the University of Louisville School of Medicine, nationally recognized expert in treating addiction and chronic pain. He is a past president of the Greater Louisville Medical Society, president-elect of the Kentucky Society for Addiction Medicine, and serves on the American Medical Association's Pain Task Force. And Dr. Murphy, welcome to the program, because one of the things that, I think it's important that we lay out, it's kind of easy to tell from listening to us where we sort of fall on this issue, but the jury is still out on everything because we're always learning new things with science. And the one thing that I think that is definitive is that there are both advantages and disadvantages to medical marijuana, and that's why we wanted to bring you in to kind of go over those objectively with us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. There are some definite advantages to marijuana. Marijuana is, in every respect, a drug, and there are benefits and there are harms with it, and we have to sort that out. And I think that maybe we can start getting some education about that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into it.
I got a question for you. Okay, Dr. Murphy, I'm addicted to Ambien. I can't sleep without it. I've been on Ambien for 8 years. In your opinion, your professional medical opinion, would I be safer ingesting marijuana at night to help me sleep or the Ambien? Because they're both drugs, like you said, but I just think that there would be less side effects with marijuana, but you're the doctor. You tell me.
I would tell you if you were my patient. If we had a physician-patient relationship and I knew you and I knew your background, and then I could have that relationship with you and decide with you what's best for you. It might be that Ambien is best for you. Now, I heard you say you're addicted, so I think we should start by defining what that means.
Okay.
Everyone says I'm addicted to love, I'm addicted to this, I'm addicted to that.
That was Robert Palmer.
Well, here's my definition of addiction when it comes to my relationship with Ambien. If I try to sleep without Ambien, and maybe it's psychosomatic, I don't think it is, it's not happening.
Okay, then you have developed a physical dependence on Ambien. That's not addiction.
Okay.
Addiction is a brain disorder.
Okay.
What's happened to you, it sounds like, is that your body is so used to Ambien, it can't sleep without it now. So there will be a withdrawal syndrome, a withdrawal time when you couldn't sleep. An addiction is different. An addiction is a disease of a part of the brain called the reward center, where it's just haywired, and there's a craving for the medicine or the drug for a non-medical purpose. There's a compulsion to use it and loss of control over this. Now that's different than being physically dependent. You can be addicted to a drug and not have it anywhere near your body. You're craving it, you're thinking about it because that part of your brain is damaged. What you probably have, and what most people have that think they're addicted, they have a physical dependence on it.
Can you go? I'm sorry, Dan.
Yeah, now, doctor, from your perspective, medically speaking, some people will say that marijuana only helps a very specific type of seizure. Others say it's great for pain management. From your medical perspective, what does marijuana right now that we physically know will help individuals?
Okay, let's define marijuana first. Marijuana, as we talk about this, is a plant. It's in a raw form. There's lots of things in that plant, some of which are very helpful, very medicinal. And an example of this is the CBD, cannabidiol, you see around there. In fact, there is a medicine out there approved now in the United States that's derived from marijuana that's cannabidiol. It's called Epidiolex. It's for the children that have these severe seizures. And that's available. It's FDA approved. So the thought that we don't have medical marijuana now is not really true. We have it. It's approved. Secondly, there's been a pill around for a long time, for many, many years, called dronabinol or Marinol. That's a trade name. It is THC. THC, tetrahydrocannabidiol, is the psychoactive part of marijuana, the part that gets you high. But it also has some medical benefit. And the medical benefit we know for THC is it helps people that have a wasting away syndrome, like patients suffering from AIDS or HIV. Also, people that have post-chemotherapy nausea, cancer patients, they can benefit from the THC. THC, the chemical, is approved by the FDA and the DEA because that drug is not derived from the cannabis plant. Epidiolex, the CBD, is the only drug that's approved by the FDA, just got approved, derived from the cannabis plant. The reason why, cannabis, for some reason, has been categorized as a Schedule I drug in this country for too many years. Schedule I drug means there is no accepted medical benefit. We all know there is some definite medical benefits from what's in marijuana, but it's a Schedule I drug. We can't study it because of that. We can't use it in patients, and it needs to be decriminalized and taken off of the Schedule I listing by the DEA.
There was recently an article by Alex Borenson. He also wrote a book, Tell Your Kids the Truth About Marijuana. He essentially builds a case that there's no medical value in marijuana. And yet when I hear what you're saying, how can somebody definitively make that statement if we can't study it because it's a Schedule I drug? And yet we have loads of anecdotal evidence and medical evidence that it's actually working. So, I mean, I hear a disconnect here between the reality of the situation and I guess people that are trying to build a case against it. Does that make sense? I mean, I've gotten probably 10 hard copies of this article and probably 200 emails from people saying, see, medical marijuana is bad. Look at what this guy says. But yet, from what you're saying, how can you even make a definitive statement about it? You know?
Well, let me help you understand this better. medical marijuana or marijuana is, again, has some benefits and harms. And think about a bell-shaped curve. On one end of the curve, there are people that could probably use it forever and never had any problems with it. On the other end, people that might develop severe problems, addiction. And by the way, marijuana is addictive. Okay, it's not as addictive as opioids. It's addictive in about like alcohol would be. It's addictive. Okay, but they also can have psychosis. They can get schizophrenic sort of reactions to it, anxiety disorders. In adolescents, using it can actually cause permanent damage to IQ development. And there's also breathing and lung issues that can happen to your body by smoking it or using it that way. So on one end of the spectrum, there are people that will be harmed by it. Now, if that bell-shaped curve has 100 people total in it, it may have 2 or 3 people that might be harmed. Make that 100 million people, and you may have 1 million people that are harmed by it. And right now, we don't have enough true scientific evidence to say it's healthy or how to use it in its current form. That's why it needs to be studied. Medical science now, people that I hang out with in the addiction circles and the science circles, we're not saying that it should be criminal. We should say that it should be decriminalized, but maybe put the brakes on it a little bit. Let's not just unleash it on the entire country because we're not sure what it will do to a large population.
But you can't even start to be sure until it's decriminalized from the Schedule 1. We can't even begin to look at it, is what you're saying.
It's very hard to study.
Right.
I mean, a Schedule 1 drug, it's like heroin, for example,
right,
or cocaine or meth or crystal meth. I mean, if we want to study something like that, you basically have to, I don't know how you go about doing it. It's very, very difficult to study that. It's a Schedule 1 drug. We have to get it off that list so that we can study it in controlled settings, in universities, in research areas where we can actually find answers to these questions that we can have good studies on. A lot of the data now is anecdotal. It's stories. Everyone knows somebody's benefited from maybe marijuana, somebody's got in trouble with it. But we have to have studies that we put other drugs through.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that we're not already doing that. I guess the official studies, but it's been around for decades. Listen, you're listening to News Radio 840 WHAS, the Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana for the next hour and a half. It is presented by KCC Heating and Cooling. I want to thank those folks for sponsoring this show tonight. Doc, we're talking to Dr. James Murphy right now to try to get the medical side of this conversation before we move later in the show to how do we get this thing through to Kentucky. Now, Doc, I hear stories of the NFL players, and they say it's the only thing that helped me through after Sunday. So Sunday they get beat up, Sunday night they smoke, Monday morning they smoke and they feel better. They say it helps them heal better. On the other side of that, you have this the epilepsy, you have cancer patients. This thing has a wide range of uses. I'm sitting here going, how does one plant, how does that all work for all these different things, right?
Well, let me tell you what we know scientifically that we've proven that it does help. It does help the people that have severe pain. Think of the cancer patient with severe pain. People that have nerve damage pain. People that have multiple sclerosis and terrible spasms. People that have, and children especially, that have these severe seizure disorders. Also, the nausea I talked about, and also this wasting away we see with HIV. And there are some other things, too, that are on the fringes that we do have good evidence that it's beneficial for. But we also know that it has issues as well, as I mentioned earlier. But you mentioned pain in the NFL. A lot of people equate the fact that they're high or they've got an altered mental state with that my pain's taken care of. Uh-huh. There have been no studies to show that marijuana is actually helpful in pain. But we also know that it has issues as well, as I mentioned earlier. But you mentioned pain in the NFL. A lot of people equate the fact that they're high or they've got an altered mental state with that my pain's taken care of. Uh-huh. There have been no studies to show that marijuana is actually helpful in pain. It may help some of the symptoms that go along with chronic pain, or if somebody has had multiple back surgeries and they have nerve damage along with their usual pain, they might be some benefit in that regard. But for the NFL player that's going to smoke a joint after a big game, they're getting relaxed. They're getting something else is happening. It's not really helping their pain. There's been no evidence to support that. And I'm a pain specialist. I study this all the time, and I have patients that use this and take this. And it's not that I tell them not to take it or whatever. But I discuss with them why, in their particular case, it might be of benefit to them to keep doing it.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, you said that marijuana is addictive in some form. Would you agree that Oxycontin and other medications are extremely addictive? And are they more addictive than marijuana or less addictive than marijuana?
It's hard to judge something, a particular substance, as being just categorized as being more addictive. A lot depends on the person. There are some people that can take Oxycontin till forever and they're not going to become addicted. And there are some that if it's in the room with them, they'll become addicted. So a lot of it is genetically, and a lot of it has to do with how fast it gets to the brain. In other words, if you smoke something, that's the fastest way to get a chemical to your brain. And the blood level rises there and a high occurs. So that's why smoking marijuana is like the worst way to use it as a medicine. But that's the way most people do. But that's a great way to get high if you're trying to get that's your goal with it. But if people take a medicine properly screened the right way, in other words, they're low risk, taken for the right reason, their risk of becoming addicted to a drug like Oxycontin is actually quite low. And there are some studies that would show that your risk of addiction with a properly used opioid is less than your risk of addiction to marijuana by smoking it. It has to do with the right person delivered the right way in the proper format. In these pills, Oxycontin, the reason Oxycontin really became so horrible in the 90s is because people would take it and they would crush it. And what would happen is instead of it being a delayed response, it was immediate response.
They were snorting it. Yeah.
And it went to the brain, like I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. They would get that high, and once that high occurred, it is a quite addictive substance once it reaches the brain in high concentrations.
Hey. I was going to ask you, too, when we're talking medical, I think a lot of people's fear of this is it's the first logical step to recreational. We're talking just medical today, but I was out in Colorado. So when we talk about medical use, you mentioned smoking it. We think of Cheech and Chong. But if you go out there are different ways. There's vapor. There's much more highly concentrated THC. Gummies. Brownies. Medicinally speaking, what do we do with this? Is this a modern version? Is this like for pain management? Is this a high THC concentration? Is this simply smoking a joint that you grew? What are we doing with this?
You mean in Colorado?
No, as far as what we're going to do here, or for a medical benefit.
If they passed it.
If we pass it, and from your perspective, is this going to be some highly concentrated version of pot? What do we use actually medically speaking?
Let's talk about.
It's not just hand the guy a joint and say your pain's going to be better, right?
Let's talk about what we have now. Okay, well, we have a drug here that I mentioned, the dronabinol pill. That's a pill. A pill is generally a good way to take a medicine because it gets digested, it gets in the body relatively in an easy manner. And so I would say that an oral pill. Now, also sublingual under the tongue. There is the cannabidiol, which is the drug for the kids with seizures. That's a liquid form. They swallow that. So it's oral.
All derived from the plant that we are going to grow, regulated.
Right. Well, not the THC, not the one from the laboratory, the dronabinol pill. It's the same chemical, but apparently it's okay because it's in a lab.
It's not the stuff in the gas station.
It's made from a lab, not grown, so it's okay.
Yeah, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, really. It should be okay. We should be able to study it.
There you go.
But there is a drug in Canada called Sativex, which it's a spray, an oral spray. It's for multiple sclerosis. Mm-hmm. The symptoms of multiple sclerosis. It is a spray. It is 50% THC from the plant, 50% cannabidiol. So that's an example of a drug that's out there. So when you ask me what forms, kind of the same way drugs are given now. There might even be a patch you can put on your skin where you can get absorbed gradually into your body that's helpful. And it might be an injectable form, but it would be generally in the forms that we have now. Vaping would not be one that I would expect to ever be something that we would be in favor of.
Recommend you.
Yeah. You were talking about the lungs and that being the fastest way, I guess, to get high. I read an article recently that
the human body has, and I'm probably going to butcher how this is said because I'm not familiar with all the terms, but the human body has cannabidiol receptors in it. That there's sort of a historical precedent that we've used this as a medicine for thousands of years because the body has a natural sort of receiver system for those chemicals in that plant. Is that true?
That's exactly right. They're called cannabinoid receptors, and we've actually have subsets of them, CB1, CB2, and they have different actions in the body. What happens is the drug gets in the body, the chemical attaches to the receptor, and things happen. Now, in the case of THC, when that gets in the body and goes to that reward center of the brain, it's a pleasure. It's a high that occurs there. Okay, when the cannabidiol goes to the same area, the same thing doesn't happen. That's why the CBD, the cannabidiol, is not addictive.
Okay.
And the THC, in contrast, would be addictive.
Interesting.
Again, we got about 3 minutes before we go to break, and then we're going to talk to some legislators after that. Again, you're listening to News Radio 840 WHAS, the town hall focusing on medical marijuana, presented by KCC Heating and Cooling. What is there? Look, antidepressants are prescribed by the thousands every single day across this country. I personally believe anxiety is one of America's worst problems right now. I think that's why we have 33 states that have moved to some sort of medical marijuana because people are just stressed out. Does marijuana help with the person that's just, I'm stressed, man, I'm depressed, I'm stressed all the time? Is that an answer that could medical marijuana replace some of these prescriptions for antidepressants, which, by the way, comes with a long list of side effects? If you ever see those commercials, it's like extreme diarrhea, suicide, all these little side effects for antidepressants. Is that something that medical marijuana can replace?
In its current form, as we know it to be, the answer is no. It will not. What will happen when people think they're getting anxiety relief with marijuana, it does chill them out for a little bit. But what happens is they go into withdrawal when it leaves their system, and the anxiety can get worse, and they get caught in a vicious cycle of it.
Okay.
So the thought that it actually is helping anxiety is fool's gold. It's not happening. It's probably worsening it. And there's actually an anxiety disorder that can be caused by smoking marijuana.
And before we let you go, I have one other question. I recently listened to a podcast about this, and one of the points that was being made was that, and you mentioned this briefly a while ago, that someone who was against medical marijuana was making the point that it causes schizophrenia. And you basically touched on that a few minutes ago, but it sounded more like maybe if you have a predisposition to that, some people might. Could you explain that?
I also saw something on this, too. Some of the states that have legalized that people that are doing it legally, recreationally, some of the more hardy stuff, they're seeing incidents of schizophrenia and violence in some of the states that have legalized it.
Let's hold him over for just 1 minute before we bring the legislators on, because I want to get an answer to that question.
Yeah.
But we want to thank also our sponsor tonight, KCC Heating and Cooling. I am Leland Conway, along with Dwight Whitten, Tony Vanetti, Dave Jennings, our guest, Dr. James Murphy, and we're going to have some legislators on in just a moment. You're listening to the Medical Marijuana Town Hall on News Radio 840 WHAS.
This is a News Radio 840 WHAS Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana, presented by KCC Heating and Cooling.
All right, News Radio 840 WHAS. Again, big thanks to our sponsor tonight, KCC Heating and Cooling, as we get the conversation rolling in the WHAS Medical Marijuana Town Hall. Our guest for the first half hour has been Dr. James Murphy. And we want to talk to him just a couple of seconds longer, and then we're going to bring some legislators on.
I want to read this tweet first from Melissa.
I saw this.
My dad is a Vietnam vet who's on strong pain medicine. He should have the right to medicate with marijuana without the threat of losing his VA benefits, end quote.
I totally agree with that. Big amen. All right, I wanted to ask Dr. Murphy just real quick. I recently listened to a podcast where the point was being made, or the case was being made, that medical marijuana would cause schizophrenia in some people. What is the research behind that? Is there any?
I think the medical term is reefer madness.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
thank you, Tony.
Okay. So I think what you're talking about is the psychotic symptoms, the hallucinations that can happen, and it can be permanent. And we're seeing that more and more I think what's happening is that the marijuana that's out there is stronger, and the level of THC in it. And what we're seeing is that in heavy users, that it's that use it for whatever reason, whether it be not necessarily for medical purposes, but heavy users.
Because it's Saturday.
Yeah, and they use it ongoing, that they can develop these symptoms. The dangerous and sad thing about that, in addition to the fact that it's just sad, is that that's very difficult to treat. If that sets in, it's not as easily treatable as a typical schizophrenic would be.
So from your perspective, that's probably more likely in a state where it's recreationally legal than under a doctor's care.
Well, I would think that it's much less likely under a doctor's care. I wouldn't. I think in where it's recreationally legal. By the way, I think that's a separate argument than medical. If society wants to decide if they want to bring this in and allow people to do it, that's another argument. But in terms of under a doctor's care, I would think that if we can do in the proper doctor-patient relationship where you're screening people properly and you're talking about risks and benefits and giving them autonomy to make some decisions, I would think that that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and I would think that if it's legalized even recreationally, you'd be able to regulate it so that those high amounts of THC are not in there as well. So,
well, the American Society of Addiction Medicine, and I'm not speaking for them, but I'm a member. They are for decriminalization, not necessarily legalization everywhere for recreational use or whatever, but decriminalization, and they want it to be studied so that we can understand how to make this a medicine.
Before we let you go, very quickly, any cons to legalizing this medically?
Well, it depends on how you do it. The situation is we need to make sure that we go slow with this, not unleash it on the entire society, study it like we would a regular medicine. And there's never a con to finding out what's going to help people.
Yeah, I think it's a point. With
Thank
Dr.
you,
Murphy,
Doctor.
thank you so much. U of L School of Medicine, and we may hear from him again at some point before the evening is over. But thank you very much. Great job. And we're going to bring in some legislators here. But first, we want to hear from the governor. Governor Matt Bevin was on with Terry Miners the other day on why he supports medical marijuana but not recreational use.
The difference is that one is being used as medicine for people who are suffering, in most cases debilitating to the degree even of death as it relates to cancer patients. And the other is for people who want to alter their minds for no productive or constructive purpose, and it comes at a societal cost that isn't even remotely worth it. That's the difference.
But if, say, 80% of the state supports it, if the people...
Well, here's what I'll tell you, Terry. If 80% of the state supports it, then it will happen, because the 80% will support the people at the ballot box that will come to Frankfurt and pass that into law. And if they do, it doesn't matter what my opinion is on it.
Also, on Terry Miners last week, Representative John Yarmouth addressed the issue of medical marijuana in Kentucky. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's a great idea. We're way behind it. A lot of other states in authorizing that. It's going to be nationally allowable. We might as well just go ahead and do it. A lot of people find relief from it. They can't get relief any other way, and there's no point in not doing it.
Yeah, it looks like the vast majority of Kentuckians are supportive of the concept, so I don't think there's going to be that much resistance to it.
No, it's not a political problem at all. And again, years ago I had an aunt who died at 52, and she had colon cancer, and the only way she could get any relief was through marijuana. She tried everything, and so people had to essentially perform criminal acts to get her marijuana. One of whom was my mother, and that's just silly.
I'm trying to picture your mother as a criminal because she's such a sweet lady. It's just a weird concept.
But she figured out how to go out and find marijuana for her sister.
All right. Interesting conversations there, and I think a lot of people know somebody who has done something that should not be considered criminal in order to do something like this, and yet it still is. Again, you're listening to the News Radio 840 WHAS. Medical Marijuana Town Hall. KCC Heating and Cooling is our sponsor tonight. We want to welcome our legislators in. We're going to have Representative Jason Nemes, who sponsored the bill in the House, later on in the program. And State Senator Dan Seum is here in the House with us.
Thank you for having me.
And you not only are supportive of medical, but also recreational. And you've been fighting this fight for a long time, Senator.
We have. And we do not like the word recreational. We call our bill the Adult Responsible Use Act. Over 21. That's the bill.
Right. So let's dig into this. You have personal experience.
Yes, I have. It was interesting. It was mentioned about colon cancer. I am a colon cancer survivor, and I did partake in some cannabis with the chemo and the radiation, and it was very, very helpful. And once I had the surgery, they gave me the Oxycontin. I threw it in the garbage and went home and smoked a joint. So,
you have my vote, sir.
So I've said that before, but it happens to be true. And, of course, if you're like me, I grew up in the street, and I understand that. And interesting enough, the doctor mentioned something about us unleashing this on the public. Doc, it's already out there.
Yeah, big time. But
just ask John Yarmouth's mom.
No, but Senator Seum, that's a good point. It is out there, but it's also out there laced with fentanyl and other things like that. But let me talk about House Bill 1836. 16 yeas, 6 nays, 42 co-sponsors. There's been public polls that have showed of the state, 78 and 85% of the state wanting medical marijuana. Okay? But with all that said and done, is this bill going to be heard?
Well, apparently, no, as of today, by the way, that's Representative Nemes' bill. It is House Bill 136.
Right.
It's currently in the bill. The fellow named Petrie is the chairman of it, of the committee that it's in, the Judiciary Committee. Petrie, the chairman. Nemes now has 12 of the 16 votes. Petrie has a no vote, and I asked him, I actually was in his office the other day, and I begged him, you can vote no, but hear the bill. And he said, I will take that under advisement, and went back and said, I'm not going to hear the bill. So there you are. You got the majority of the people with 42 co-sponsors. I understand we have 62 votes on the floor that day. The majority of the committee
One
wants
person
it.
can kill it?
One guy stops the bill, because the power of the committee chair is just this. He gets to set the agenda. If the bill's not on the agenda, it does not get heard.
So in my opinion, if 85% in some of the polls want this passed, if you're not going to do your job and at least let the bill be heard, in my opinion, get your ass up out of that seat. You're not in the right job.
Well, I agree with that, because back with the days when I was chairing committees, back in the House and Senate, on a rare occasion I was a no vote on the bill, but I always let them be heard. That's just the process. If the votes are there, the people spoke, so to speak.
Right.
And that's how I handled that.
From your perspective, is the opposition coming because that's not our side that's bringing this to the table? They're against it on some scientific merit. It's the inevitable first step to recreational. What is their opposition? Where's that coming from?
That's a good question, because, if you don't understand that the big lie has been exposed, I'm talking about the historical lie about the damages that marijuana does. The doctor talk about addiction. I've got one doc who showed me a whole list of addictions, and he had cannabis below caffeine. And by the way, I'm addicted to caffeine. So for those,
so am I. So am I.
Wow.
As we look right here. Not me. I abstain from caffeine. Just kidding.
So
that's Diet Mountain Dew. That's the South End
That's
caffeine.
in my coffee.
But
cup.
I've got the
everything
same
fun.
problem over with my Senate Bill 80 over in the Senate. I got one committee chairman holding my bill up. So.
Well, okay, let's talk about Senate Bill 80, the responsible use of marijuana.
Correct.
In my opinion, the public opinion wants this legalized. Everyone, sure, there's going to be holdouts and standouts, but in my opinion, if you don't want to use it, don't use it. Mm-hmm. My main concern is people going out and buying this on the streets, and now you're getting hit with fentanyl, and all you wanted to do was take a couple of smokes of marijuana. How come your bill? Is your bill going to get to the floor?
No, it's not. It's not even going to be heard. Well, it's interesting enough. The governor come out and said he was for it.
Right.
But his lieutenant governor choice, who is
wait. The governor has not said he was for
medical. He was for medical.
Yes,
medical.
he was for medical marijuana. Yes.
And interesting enough, well, the medical bill, there's a senator has the bill in the Senate identical to Nemes's bill, and that's Senate Bill 170. Okay, and that's Steve West has got that bill in the Senate, and plus my bill. So I got this Alvarado, who is chairman of Health and Welfare, holding up both of those bills.
New lieutenant governor candidate.
And Alvarado is Governor Bevin's lieutenant governor choice. So I got the governor on one side saying he's for, and his lieutenant governor saying I'm not hearing the bill. So it's a double talk. It's a shame that they don't want to hear it. So,
what kind of financial impact can we see? I know that CBD oil kind of hit the market here. How long ago did that become legal to sell in Kentucky? It wasn't too long ago, right? Like a year ago?
A couple of years, I believe.
Okay, a couple of years.
Yeah.
There's one on every corner now. I know in the advertising business, it's pretty darn good in the advertising business with CBD oil stores. I have a buddy that owns one in to sell in Kentucky. It wasn't too long ago, right? Like a year ago?
A couple of years, I believe.
Okay, a couple of years.
Yeah.
There's one on every corner now. I know in the advertising business, it's pretty darn good in the advertising business with CBD oil stores. I have a buddy that owns one in Prospect that when he shows up at 10 a.m., there are 6 people on the sidewalk waiting to get in to buy his CBD oil, and that's just the CBD oil. There's already been a financial impact in the Commonwealth of Kentucky with CBD oil. I can't imagine medical marijuana or even recreational marijuana what that would do. Correct or no?
Well, interesting. I also have a granddaughter. We got 24 grandchildren, by the way, and I have one granddaughter who's epileptic, and she's now a 24-year-old adult woman and has discovered cannabis, and she partakes in that. She now has an apartment, she has a man in her life, and she has a full-time job. She functions because of this product. Wouldn't it be nice if she could buy it in a store legally and knowing what she's buying?
She's an outlaw.
She's a criminal and scared to death that her employer is going to find out.
Of course.
So, anyway, so we have these issues within the family.
From a practical standpoint, how you say she's epileptic?
Yes.
If you don't mind sharing, what was the difference that it made? In terms of, because I've heard people say, like, my kid used to have 1,000 seizures a week, and now they have one.
This was pre-puberty onset of epilepsy, and all through school she had this, I hate to hate this, very unkind zombie look about her on the medication that they were giving her, and she used that all through school. And of course, how does a young lady date if she has epileptic? She doesn't.
Right.
So she was with my son for many, many years, and as an adult, she got searching around, discovered that this THC, I would assume that's what has been helpful to her, and she functions at a pretty high level at this point. She's holding down a full-time job.
Yeah.
So she has discovered that, and maybe it's a lessening of the epilepsy issue. Maybe it's help. It's a combination of things, but God bless it's out there that my young granddaughter has a life. So,
as someone who's obviously very much for this, do you have any reservations about the bill itself? Any reservations at all about the way we're going about this?
Not really. If you were going to talk about my bill, Senate Bill 80, the full adult use, we estimate that would create $300 million in new money.
Oh,
and over a period of time. We have this school safety bill that we all want in Frankfort. The governor wants it. Everybody wants this school safety bill, which means that we got 173 school districts. We want to be able to train people to be in every one of these schools to keep our kids safe. How are we going to fund it? Guess what? I know how. Okay, so I know where the $300 million is. So it's a possibility. And again, as the doctor mentioned, don't unleash this on the public, guys. It's all out there anyway. It's been out there for years. And my argument is that once you take that product and that money that's under the table, put it on top of the table, you get to tax it.
Okay. You're listening to News Radio 840 WHAS Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana. It's presented by KCC Heating and Cooling, Dwight, Leland, Dave, and myself. It doesn't look. We have 10 days. Is that right?
About 12. Maybe
we have
12.
about 12 days. What you're saying to me from a couple of gentlemen that this is not going to make it to the floor to vote, right? It's not going to make it?
At this point in time, that's the way it's looking. Now, the fat lady hasn't sung yet.
All right. Okay. Well, where's she at, though? Is she warming up?
You meant gravitationally challenged.
This isn't going to happen.
Right.
But Senator Seum, I got a question about that. The two people could be holding up the different bills, the responsible use bill and the medical marijuana.
Two people.
Which, by the way, has 42 co-sponsors.
42.
And 85% of the state wants this done. So it seems to me like that if the two people they're not voting for their constituents' views.
Absolutely. That's correct.
So why? Because if you pass medical marijuana, the process is you have to have a doctor prescribe this to you, right? You can't just go get your marijuana card and you get to go and buy marijuana. A doctor has to prescribe it, just like anything else.
Representative Nemes is here, and I think we can get around to talking about his bill, what's in his bill, and so forth. And, and I'm going to put something point blank here. I got a governor that says he's somewhat for the medical. His lieutenant governor is holding up the bill. Folks, there's an election coming up in November. I want to point that out. So,
Dan Seum Jr. is here. Your son is here with you, and I see you've got some notes as well.
Yeah, I do, and thank you for having us. This is a very important topic. I was listening to the doctor, and I listened to the legislators in Frankfurt keep hollering about FDA. They need FDA approval. Well, there is a program called the Investigational New Drug Program. And that program bypasses all FDA. As a matter of fact, we grow cannabis at the University of Mississippi, and we've been providing 5 patients with 300 pre-rolled joints every 25 days since 1982. We have had them here and testify before committee. And the fella, he stood up to ask.
They're part of an experiment of some sort?
It was called the Investigative New Drug Program that's been it's been closed, but they retroed these people.
So this is like when Norm got the beer tasting job.
I was going to say,
in Cheers.
How long was the line?
These people got that
right. And you'll roll it for me.
So is the program up in smoke now, or is
it's still going?
Oh,
it's still going, but you can't. I mean, you can get into the Investigational New Drug Program, but not with cannabis right now. So that's been happening. Another thing about research, we have been paying for 40 years. A fellow named Dr. Raphael Meshulam in Israel. For 40 years, we have how many states legal that have studied this? All of Canada has studied it. They're hiding behind this FDA. Now, here's a problem that I have. Some of the legislators that are holding this up, they're in the hemp CBD business. They don't want medical marijuana or cannabis to be legalized because it's going to cut in their profits, and I'm saying that now. They've got their license, they're selling CBD, and the bad thing is people are testing positive for THC after only consuming CBD. That makes the ones that are selling the CBD legally dealers. Just flat out dealers. That's what they're doing. They're selling it legally, and people are testing positive for it. So it's got to change the. Like I said,
is that an unusual case? You say that there are people that are testing positive because they say you do not.
Yeah, is that unusual for CBD to be?
Well, it's happening.
From hemp?
It's happening. What happens is your THC will collect in your fatty cells and be prominent there for up to 60 days.
But there's only trace amounts in hemp CBD.
But the thing is, there's 0.3% or less. If you keep taking it every day, 2 and 3 times a day, it will accumulate.
I want to go back to the budget side of things because you brought up $300 million that could be brought in.
Of new money that's in the underground at this point in time.
How do we know that that's new money? Because the argument on the other side, the devil's advocate argument here is that, maybe that's just displaced money. Are we talking about would Kentucky become a medical marijuana tourism destination or a marijuana tourism destination? Where's that money coming from?
The medical marijuana itself does not.
I meant recreational.
Recreational or adult use. Understand that these millions of, not just 300 million, millions of dollars are all out there in the underground economy. Kentucky is well known for its number one crop. We grow the best, folks. Mm-hmm. We've known it for years. Okay, plus we got a 2-grow season, which is better than what Canada has. So those millions are out there. So the $300 million is the taxes that you would earn on those dollars that are now under the table. Okay. Also, there's another side to this. If we decriminalize this, we would save close to $1 million a year in prisons and people.
I was going to ask you about that. What are we paying to incarcerate people right now?
Well, I don't know what the fee is, but I know that we now have 2,168 people incarcerated in the state of Kentucky that have been found guilty of possession of marijuana.
So not violent crimes.
Well, but And sometimes, most of the time, it's part of another charge.
Okay.
But it's all about less than a year because it's 2,168 people are in the jail system, not the prison system. So.
Yep. Did you have a question, Tony?
I did. I think the hypocrisy involving, and look, I guessed it wrong. I thought when we started putting money into the Bourbon Trail Tour, I thought, what? No one's going to go on a bourbon tour. That's not going to be a thing. It is the biggest thing that this state and city has done in a decade. You cannot get a spot in these bourbon tours. There are 11 bourbons downtown distilleries downtown alone. Out in the state, it is a boom. It is becoming a billion-dollar industry.
I think I saw an article the other day. We went from 14 to 16 distilleries 20 years ago to 67 now.
Yes. Okay. So my point exactly for a state that is not just promoting, it is the future. They believe in this state tourism is bourbon to now medical marijuana being the devil. I don't get it. Yeah. I don't get it.
Okay, Senator Seum.
I don't get it.
For the frustrated listeners saying, okay, I'm one of the 85%. I want this. And they're thinking that one or two people are holding this up. It's easy to say, well, next time they're up for election, vote them out. That's the macro. The micro is I want this done in the next 12 days.
I understand.
What can people do, if anything, to move this along?
Well, there's a Senator Alvarado, who is, again, Bevan's lieutenant governor choice, that's holding up the bill. He's online. Go on your computer to Kentucky General Assembly, find Alvarado's phone number, call him, okay, swamp him. Petrie over in the House, same thing. Representative Petrie.
Dish on him.
Bang on this guy. Go after him, and if anybody happens to be
in a civil way, people.
Oh, sure.
You always do it with
be polite.
Do it with some class, folks.
Is there a disconnect? Because you can hear people tell police all the time unfairly, I pay your salary. But, in fact, legislators do work for us. But it seems like it's turned around where a lot of legislators think that we work for them.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, well, we've got about a minute here, so I want to thank you, Senator Seum.
Again, I'm Senator Dan Seum. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, and Dan Seum Jr. as well, because you mentioned the FDA thing, and I was like, right now there are active FDA-approved drugs recalled because they're causing cancer and any other number of things.
Every 19 minutes, somebody dies from an FDA-approved drug.
And I think that's a great point to bring up. So, guys, thank you so much for coming in. We're also going to have Representative Jason Nemes. He's the sponsor of that bill that Senator Seum just mentioned, and we'll talk to him about that and how we might be able to continue to push this through. Plus, Mandy Connell is going to join us at 7:35. We're going to talk to her. She lives in Colorado now, so we'll talk about what it's like on the ground there.
Actually stoned.
All right, you are listening to the Medical Marijuana Town Hall, brought to you by KCC Heating and Cooling. I'm Leland Conway, Dwight Whitten, Dave Jennings, Tony Vanetti, News Radio 840 WHAS.
This is a News Radio 840 WHAS Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana. Presented by KCC Heating and Cooling.
Leland Conway along with Tony Vanetti, Dwight Whitten, and Dave Jennings. And again, thanks to our sponsor making tonight possible, KCC Heating and Cooling. We are talking medical marijuana. We appreciate Senator Dan Seum and his son Dan Seum Jr. coming in. We also appreciate Dr. Murphy, who may pop back in for a minute before the night is over. Coming up at 7:30, Mandy Connell is going to join us from Colorado, live from Denver.
I want to put Dave Jennings on notice. You have one warning for the Petri dish mention. Okay, so what I'm saying is, penalty box is next, and then you're kicked off the show. Okay. We have another one that equals Petri dish or not.
I will try. Now, I want to hashtag that picture that was sent out.
Yeah.
I'm going to hashtag my own serial killer face in that photo. Jennings needs a joint.
That'll be perfect.
Everyone else is smiling.
That sounds like a bumper sticker.
And I've got a Vanetti hemorrhoid.
You need a joint, and Leland needs to have a cold beer.
What?
More than
you
half
need a drink and have a cold beer.
Yeah, this is coming from our last Twisted View when I admitted I'd never been drunk before.
Let's get back on top.
All right, we've got Representative Jason Nemes in the building with us, and Jason has you're the sponsor behind the House bill for medical marijuana. And what I think is interesting about your position on this is that when you were elected, you were against medical marijuana entirely, but you were willing to listen and keep an open mind, and when you talk to your constituents, everything changed. And so you're not for recreational.
That's right.
But you are strongly in favor
of medical.
That's right. When I was elected the first time, I wasn't for it. When I was elected this past November, I was the principal proponent of it in the House. So Representative St. Onge and I in Kenton County are pushing it forward. But, when I was elected the first time, I wasn't against it. I went and met with a group of folks from Crestwood in Oldham County, because 20% of my district's in Oldham County.
OC.
And that's right. That's
Just
right.
saying.
Great place. And so I went with
triple tax us.
I went because
yeah.
I wanted to look at my constituents in the eye and say, I disagree with you, and here's why. I thought, it's kind of my responsibility. I'm an elected official. And I went there not with really an open mind. I was saying my story, and a mother leaned forward. I'll never forget it. Leland, she leaned forward and she grabbed my hand and she said, Jason, let me tell you something real quick. And she told me about her 7-year-old daughter who had a bunch of seizures, and then she admitted that to committing felonies to get a product for her daughter, and said what it did for her daughter. And then went around the room, there were 8 of them, and told me what it meant for them. And I thought, these folks aren't liars. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something to this. So I started looking into it, reading a bunch of literature, calling a bunch of docs in my district, and totally changed my position. I mean, I was wrong. And now I'm pushing it as hard as I can. It's beyond time for it to happen in Kentucky. 33 states have it, and the people in Kentucky need it. And let's let the doctors decide whether it's good for their patients.
Okay, so you were against it at first, but then you went and you spoke with your constituents. Now you're on board, and this is actually your bill.
It's not rocket science, right?
Yeah, right.
Talk to your constituents. Do what they ask you to do.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
In my opinion, there's an unfair demonization of marijuana out there, responsible use or medical use. And they always use the phrase, well, it's a gateway drug. It's a gateway. In my opinion, and I'm not a doctor, obviously, but it seems to me like it wouldn't be so much a gateway drug as it would be an off-ramp drug for opioid users. If you get someone that's addicted, and you got to bring them down. If you come off a heroin or any opioids, you're going to go through horrible withdrawal. You might even have life-threatening symptoms. But it seems to me like that this would be a good option for the medical field with that as well. Have you considered that?
That's exactly right. That's one of the main reasons to be for it. Let me take, you made 2 points there. One is the demonization. I've never smoked marijuana in my life. I've never done an illegal drug in my life. When I was in a fraternity, I was a fraternity president. We caught 2 dudes doing it, 2 brothers doing it. We kicked them out. That's not something I played with. I thought people who did marijuana were losers, unambitious. I didn't want to be around them. Not only my dad whooped me, my coaches would have whooped me. I wasn't playing around with this. I'm not for recreational. But so it's not like I'm coming. This isn't a slippery slope for me. To your point, and I think the big point on the opioid crisis we have in Kentucky, it's one of the biggest problems we have.
No doubt.
Yeah, we have thousands upon thousands of Kentuckians dying every year, and so people say, okay, medical marijuana can help. That's not just anecdotes. We've got 33 states that have medical marijuana. And what do the studies show? Let's go to the studies. Let's go to the data. What the data says is that in medical marijuana states, the overdose rate plummets. But now hear what I'm about to say. This is more important. The prescription rates plummet. So doctors in those states who have an option for medical marijuana are choosing medical marijuana for their patients. And that's what the studies show all over the board. Most recently, published in the Journal of American Medical Association this past summer from a PhD, Dr. Wynn, from the University of Kentucky. So, we have a huge problem. We've got a lot of big problems in Kentucky. One of the biggest problems we have is our opioid addiction rates, and medical marijuana helps in the states that have it. So, there's a lot of other reasons to be for it, but that's a principal reason.
Now, you had a lot of fun with your opposition. They would give you reasons and cite studies and ask you to do the same, and you did.
That's right. Yeah, I've known President Stivers for a long time, and I think a whole lot of them. He was a mentor of me when I was a young lawyer. Still look up to him. But he went to the Senate floor early on in the session and said, look, I've been asking for the studies for 5 years. Give them to me. And so I said, hey, buddy, here we come. So I walked 15 studies to him, hand-delivered them. And then I decided that wasn't enough. I was going to, maybe a little grandstanding, but that's who I am. So I decided to publish a study every single day in between the time we took off in January to when we came back in February for like 4 weeks. Awesome. So I kind of put it in their face a little bit, but take that crap off the table. Don't talk to me about studies. Look, it is overwrought in some places. It doesn't solve all the problems that some of the advocates say that it does, but it's unquestionable it's good for Crohn's disease. It's unquestionable it's good for seizures. Some seizures, and let the doctor decide. It's unquestionable it's good for wasting syndrome, the doctor said earlier. It's unquestionable that it's good for cancer when people on chemotherapy and they're being nauseous and so forth. So these things we know.
I know I keep coming back to this, but the reason is because I sense that among those that are against medical marijuana, there's a gathering around a particular article that was recently published, and it was published in a publication that I get. And it was published in a publication that I get and love reading,
right.
in premise.
Right.
And it was published by a guy who was a former New York Times reporter, and he wrote a book called Tell Your Children the Truth About Marijuana.
Right.
He makes the case, not only in that article but in his book, that medical marijuana has no place in this scheme. I recently listened to a podcast in which he went head-to-head with a doctor and kind of showed that he was cherry-picking his data. So when we're talking about data and studies, what you're saying is there's an overwhelming amount of evidence out there already.
For some conditions.
You're not, for clarification, you're not cherry-picking your data here.
No, that's right. In some conditions, I can say this and you can say that. That's fair. But in some conditions, you can't. The doctor earlier was talking to a number of them. We know it helps, with chronic pain and a lot of other conditions. Let's let the doctors make that decision for their patient. I want to say one of the things in our bill, this is not just go to the corner store and get what you need to get get the product you want to get. Our bill requires you to have an ongoing, bona fide relationship with a doctor. It has to be your physician, not just some dude that's going to give you something. And
so
then,
Dwight can't prescribe me.
That's right.
A joint.
And you can't find out who the local doctor is who's misbehaving and go to that doctor either.
Right.
It has to be the ongoing doctor. That doctor is going to be overseen by the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure. Her license is in jeopardy every time she makes a recommendation. And so we tried to make it as tight as possible. But, it needs to be there for some folks.
All right, you are listening to News Radio 840 WHAS. This is the town hall focusing on medical marijuana. It's presented by KCC Heating and Cooling. Representative Nemes is on with us now. We got 12 days. We discussed it in the last half hour. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to pressure the folks into to putting it to a vote this time. If not this time, do you believe that eventually we will, and what kind of time frame do you think that could happen?
Look, it'll be a long shot to do it this year. I really acknowledge that, unfortunately, but I'm not giving up on this session. The vote in the Judiciary Committee is 16-6. The vote on the floor, I've got 62 people who've looked me in the eye and they told me they're going to vote for it if it gets to the floor. We have the votes. I want to vote. I understand.
If it did go, so you're saying if it get to a vote, it would pass?
Unquestionably.
Of course. And by the way, the bills, you have 42 sponsors.
There's 42 co-sponsors. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. Out of 100.
So the information is presented to the two gentlemen, Petrie and Alvarado, right?
Well, Alvarado's in the Senate. I swim in my pool only.
Okay. So, but why isn't the reason that he will allow this to go to a vote if he knows that it'll pass?
Well, I don't want to equivocate, but I want to be fair also. There are some arguments that are that convince some folks on the other side. They want to be cautious. They want to go through the FDA process. I respect these arguments. I disagree with them. The 33 states didn't wait there. We've passed right to try a couple of years ago going around the FDA process. When we passed hemp, it was illegal. But there are some arguments on the other side. And I also say it's a short session and there's a lot of priorities. So I'm trying to be fair to them. But the bottom line from my perspective is, these people are not bad people. They're not trying to do bad things. They're not corrupt. But what I'm saying is this is an important issue in Kentucky. Kentuckians overwhelmingly support it. And not only do Kentuckians overwhelmingly support it, representatives overwhelmingly support it. It's almost impossible to get 62 votes on something this controversial. And that's with 17 people who are still maybes.
Right.
Who haven't committed either way.
Right. Wow. And you said something that kind of perked my interest. You said some of the holdups may be FDA. FDA this, FDA that. Does CBD oil have FDA approval?
No, CBD oil doesn't need to. And that's another issue. Look, CBD oil has done very well for our community. I have some people in my district that's growing hemp, and they're doing wonderful with it. But CBD oil is not approved by the FDA. It's not tested, which is another problem. There's those things can be laced. One of the good things about House Bill 136 is it requires product to be tested before it gets to the end user, before it gets a human being that's using it, the Kentuckian. And so we can make sure that we don't have it laced with things like fentanyl and all the other terrible things. In my view, obviously I'm for it, and I think it's a no-brainer, but I want to be respectful of the other side and understand that there is some legitimate arguments. I will say the argument, let's just wait, to me is not legitimate.
No.
I mean, how long do we have to wait? I mean, it's been over 20 years since the first state enacted it. Almost every Western civilization country has enacted it. We know, and look, if I'm wrong, worst case scenario, if grandma overdoses, let's just watch her for a couple hours. She's going to be all right.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I've never.
I'm sorry, I find that's just a funny statement.
You better have eaten the pie that you wanted
Mama?
before that.
Mama?
Don't worry, she'll wake up. It's fine.
But now for people like you that are against recreational but for, they're going to say, or some people that are against this will say, this is just the first step. This is just a way to get the foot in the door to get recreation all across the state. What kind of safeguards are in place for this to stay medical and not become another pill mill where anybody can write a prescription and get their handful of pills or whatever it's going to be, lozenges or gummies or brownies?
Right. Well, first of all, I would say
not going to be medical brownies.
Yeah, a lot of people say, look, this is the first step. It makes it inevitable. I would say let's just look at the numbers. 33 states are medical marijuana, 9 states are recreational. The numbers just don't bear out the argument. So, and also, who gets to decide whether we go recreational in Kentucky? Legislators. So if we don't want it, then we don't have to enact it. So we're the protection. But the bill also has some protections in it and make sure that there's law enforcement inclusion in this, and there's also regulatory bodies that are watching it to make sure that it doesn't it's not a wink nod medical bill. So there's a lot of things in the bill that erect a strong barrier between medical and recreational.
Isn't the argument that it's the slippery slope kind of a cop out? To your point, it's like when I hear a legislator say to me, "Well, we don't want to open the door to recreational," then don't.
Right.
I mean, I can't open that door other than to do what we're doing tonight and make commentary or whatever. But I mean, you guys are the ones that write the bill, and you write the bill the way you see fit, hopefully reflecting your constituents' opinions and attitudes. But, I don't to me, it's a cop-out to say it's a slippery slope. They're two different issues, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there are two different issues. Like I said, I'm against recreational. I know a number of people are for it. I don't think there are all that many legislators in the House that are for it. I don't think it's a non-starter in the House of Representatives, and I don't think it'll change anytime soon. I could be wrong about that, but that's the way I see it. But to your point, Leland, if you don't want it, then don't have it. I mean, if you don't find 51 people in the House that support it, it won't happen, and there's nowhere near there right now.
You changed your mind on medical. If you sat and listened and heard the stories and listened to people in other states that have recreational, could you change your mind on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, but I'll say this. I don't see it happening because, and I know I'm going to, look, I just tell it straight. Some of the advocates want to go recreational, and I make them mad when I say this, but I just tell it straight. The more I study medical, the stronger I'm against recreational. Because the states that are recreational, they do have things that aren't, to my mind, acceptable. And so I don't think I'll get there. Maybe I would. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to totally foreclose anything, but I'm about 0% right now. I mean, so I don't foresee it ever happening. And like I said, the more studies I read, the stronger I'm against recreational.
Don't you think it's a bit irresponsible not to want? How was it put? Here's where I'm going. If I wanted to go buy marijuana now, I would have to get it off the street. And I don't know if it's laced with fentanyl. I don't know what I'm getting. But with a responsible use act,
that's right,
I would. So
exactly.
Don't you think it would help?
Of course it
with
would.
addiction, and it would just public safety in general.
Yeah.
That I would know that what I'm buying is marijuana, is not laced with an elephant tranquilizer.
And not only that, you're getting it from if you're getting it in the corner, on the alley, with somebody selling it right now illegally. Right. What else is he trying to lead you up to?
Well, no, and that's my point. If beer wasn't legal, I wouldn't buy a bathtub gin or something like that because I wouldn't know beer.
Yes, you would.
Well, okay, yeah, that's a bad example.
Well, by definition, if you buy it today, you're buying it from a felon.
Right.
You're buying it from a trafficker.
And I'm an outlaw.
Right. So what House Bill 136 does is it says, let's let the mom who's trying to get it for her daughter, or let's let the grandpa who's trying to get it for grandma, let's let them get it where the lights are bright and the cops have the keys.
And I heard, I don't absolutely.
But you're making the point, though, on recreational.
Yeah,
you're saying.
I think the responsible use. I'm for responsible use just because the general public. Let's face it. If we go into prohibition, we're going to have Al Capone, okay? And people are going to get it somewhere. And people are getting recreational use marijuana from some bad people.
That's
And
right.
it's caused a lot of trouble, and it has, when you talk about gateway drugs, marijuana being a gateway drug, I don't believe that. I don't think that that's going to lead you down a path. What I do believe is if you smoke marijuana laced with fentanyl and you continue, then you're going to be addicted to it, or you might die.
Right.
So, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I understand the argument. I don't think marijuana is a harmless thing. I've got 3 sons, 13, 10, and 8. I don't want them to have access to it. Obviously, nobody does. Senator Seum surely doesn't. But I don't want my brothers to have access to it either. If they get it, I understand the argument. But I'm sitting here and I'm against it, and I'm fighting like heck for the people who are sick and who need it.
Okay, not this session. You got a 10% chance of pushing it through in the next 12 days, right?
I'm going to try.
Okay, 10%. Would you agree with that?
Well,
I can throw the ball 60 yards down the field. I'm going to try.
Let's remind people that they can help raise those chances by making those calls to those legislators.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know what? After this town hall, we'll put up the information how to get in touch with these legislators on all of our social media sites. So you can go to Leland's, Dave's, mine, or Tony's and find the information on how to call the 2 legislators that are in question.
Yep, and I would say this. If you send a threatening email, it's going to go into the quick delete file.
Oh, no, yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
We get threatened all the time. It doesn't even faze us. If you say, hey, Representative so-and-so, I'm for this House Bill 136, and here's why, that'll be read. Mm-hmm. And so it needs to be respectful, but most importantly, it needs to be informative. And Jason Petrie, I know we mentioned him. He's the chair of Judiciary. This dude's a good man. He's a good man, and I think he's wrong on this. He knows that. We've had an exchange, but he, like me, can change his opinion.
I wouldn't argue that he's a good man because I don't know him. I do think it's irresponsible for someone to not hear a bill that everyone wants heard.
Overwhelming support.
In my opinion, that's cowardly.
In the age of social media bots that can overwhelm your inbox, are legislators really swayed by phone calls?
Yeah, man, we're political animals. We're persuaded by, if it's something that's a core belief, no. You're never going to get me to be against the Second Amendment and things like that. But if it's something that they can be educated on, and if somebody believes, look, 83% of my district's for it, that's something you better get on board, or you're going to have to go to the House the next election.
Right.
I just polled my district after I was for it just to see how far in front of my skis am I, and I put 45% Democrats, 45% Republicans, and 10% Independents. That's where the poll went out to, and it was 83%.
Wow.
I mean, it's 83% in East Jefferson County and Southern Oldham County.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Can you really throw a football 60 yards?
Yeah, you want to bet?
Oh, here we go.
Oh. You know what? Yeah, I do.
He also, let's roll, buddy. I play
baseball. A full football. I got a full high school.
Let's go
football. All right. You look pretty confident.
I used to be able to.
All right.
Not the Nerf one with that tail on it.
No. It's got to be a full size. All right. No. I'll take your word for it.
No, I want to bet.
Well, speaking of betting, so sports betting, is that going to get through?
Oh, it came out of committee this morning.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we're going to get it. I think we're going to get a vote. Representative Adam Koenig is pushing it hard. I think he's getting really close to the votes, and I think it's beyond time. I mean, this is another thing, right? It is happening in Kentucky, and other states are just preying on us.
Oh my gosh!
Let's just. I mean, come on.
I
got my phone right here. I can place a bet in 2 minutes. Let's get real.
Listen, I don't want to chase rabbits on gaming and recreational or responsible use marijuana. This is about medical.
That's
marijuana.
dog racing, by the way.
Yeah, but when it comes to responsible use, medical use, marijuana and gaming. I remember when I went to Miss Worthington's English School of Manners. I did. At finishing school, I did learn that it's good to be fashionably late to a party. But
are they on the curve?
But does Kentucky have to be last to the party on every damn thing there is?
I don't want to be last. I want to be 34th.
Beautiful.
There you go.
That's like where we are.
You want to be next.
Just a reminder, by the way, you're listening to the News Radio 840 WHAS. Medical Marijuana Town Hall. We have Representative Jason Nemes with us. I want to thank our sponsors again tonight for their help with KCC Heating and Cooling. Okay, so just to kind of boil down where you're coming from, obviously we've had the recreational side or the adult responsible use side. We've had a doctor so far, and we've got a medical marijuana supporting legislator. And I know this is we've kind of hashed this out a little bit, Representative Nemes, but I just want to reiterate, if people call, your bill still has a chance.
Oh, yeah.
Who do they call?
They need to call members of the Judiciary Committee, most importantly, the committee chairman.
And we will post all the contact on every one of our social media pages after this town hall. But I want to mimic one thing that you said. Be respectful, because if you threaten and you come out of the gate, it's going straight to the trash.
Yeah. By the way, do you have an I Hate Nemes email address? Because I've got one of those, and we can hook you up. I Hate Leland email.
We got about.
It seems like it's just my email address.
Or a Finding Nemes.
Yeah. Okay. So 2 minutes to go. Again, this bill would include that doctors have to prescribe this to patients that really need it. Instead of criminalizing John Yarmouth's mom having to buy marijuana for her sister or getting marijuana or whatever for their daughter. So it would be any doctor, or would the doctor have to be a part of some sort of...
Yeah, the doctor has to notify the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure, which that's the agency that oversees it, and that they're going to be recommending this to patients, and then only those doctors can recommend it to their bona fide patients that they have.
And we're not talking like in California when people were...
or getting marijuana or whatever for their daughter. So it would be any doctor, or would the doctor have to be a part of some sort of...
Yeah, the doctor has to notify the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure, which that's the agency that oversees it, and that they're going to be recommending this to patients, and then only those doctors can recommend it to their bona fide patients that they have.
And we're not talking like in California when people were coming in going, my elbow hurts.
Absolutely.
Or I'm really sick of not having doobies.
But then you would have some sort of prescription, and that would go through a pharmacy.
Yeah, it's a recommendation. It can't be prescription because of DEA numbers for docs, and it can't go through a pharmacy either. That's why it's a dispensary. And that's because federal law is perverting everything.
Okay.
Representative Nemes, thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, when we continue, we're going to take a couple calls. Maybe from some listeners, and we're also going to hear from Mandy Connell,
who's been living in one of those states.
So tell us what it's like.
571-8484.
It's like the purge out there.
1-800-444-8484, 571-8484. We'll continue our medical marijuana town hall. We'll take your calls. We'll talk to Mandy coming up. I'm Leland Conway, Dwight Witten, Dave Jennings, Tony Vanetti, News Radio 840 WHAS.
This is a News Radio 840 WHAS Town Hall, focusing on medical marijuana. Presented by KCC Heating and Cooling.
All right. Many thanks to our guests so far tonight. Representative Jason Nemes talking medical marijuana. Senator Dan Seum talking both medical and adult responsible use. I am Leland Conway along with Dave Jennings, Tony Vanetti, and Dwight Witten here with us. And we want to welcome a member, an all-time member of the WHAS family, because once you're here, you're always here. Our friend Mandy Connell from Denver, Colorado, and KOA. What's up, Mandy?
Oh, boy. Idiots in one place at one time.
That's why we love her.
You're where you belong.
Okay, thanks for joining us, Mandy. We'll see you next time.
Hey, listen, Mandy, I just texted you a shopping list of things I'm going to need you to mail me from Colorado. So if you could get on that, I'd appreciate it, because evidently...
Just look for the unmarked package with gummy bears with a small mark scratched off the front. That's going to be what you want.
Okay, let me take your opinion on something. Okay, we're having this medical marijuana town hall. We also talked about responsible use tonight, but when we're talking about medical use of marijuana, we learned that the bill actually has 42 sponsors. It had 16 yays. 6 nays, overwhelming response. But then we just learned a few minutes ago that the bill may not even get heard because this Representative Petrie, he doesn't want it to be heard, even though all 85% of Kentucky wants it to be heard, and in my opinion wants it to be passed. Is that about the most cowardly move you could think of, is just sit on your hands and not let the bill be heard?
Well, that has been my frustration with Kentucky politics for a long time. There should never be a kill committee.
Right.
There should never be a place to tuck something away and not let it get voted on for two reasons. One, it deserves to be heard, and two, we should force our lawmakers to go on record with a yes or no that they can be held responsible for. That's just the way it should be.
It just seems to me like this certain legislator feels that we work for him when, in fact, it's quite the other way around. Legislators work for the people, and that's gotten lost somewhere.
Yeah, and I can't help you with that. That's actually why I left Kentucky. That's a secret right there. I couldn't handle it anymore. No, it's not uncommon, and it's not just a Kentucky thing. And I think it seems like it's happening more and more often, especially when there's a controversial issue that maybe their district is divided on, or maybe they think they're going to run up against a majority of their voters, and politicians are desperate to have any excuse to not have to weigh in. If you're against it, vote no and deal with the consequences. If you're for it, vote yes and deal with the consequences.
Amen.
Mandy,
yeah, we shouldn't let them off the hook because they don't want to vote.
Okay, Mandy, you're at ground zero of recreational marijuana. Studies are thrown at, well, in Colorado and Washington, it's not all roses. It's not all bike lanes and nature trails. There is schizophrenia. There is violence on the rise. How is it actually in the land of pot that is legal?
You know, there's good and there's bad. And I want to be clear about this. I am a libertarian. I think that adults should be able to do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anybody else. That is my stance. I am pro-legalization for that reason. However, and this is a big however, there are problems that get swept under the rug as the legalization crowd starts to talk. And one of my big frustrations has been that the pro-pot lobby out here, which is now, by the way, feeding information about effective messaging all over the country. So they figured out what worked, and now they're using it all over the country. They tend to gloss over the negative effects of pot. And there are negative effects of pot. There are negative effects you don't necessarily know if you're going to be one of those people that's negatively affected until you try it or you don't try it. But we're now starting to see a lot of studies come out about the effect of marijuana on children. And I'm not talking about 9-year-olds here. I'm talking about teenagers. When they're most likely to start to dabble in it, it can lead to adult depression. I'm not going to say it causes schizophrenia, but there is a connection between teenage marijuana use and schizophrenia. It could be that they're self-medicating with pot. There's not necessarily a clear path of causation there, but these kind of conversations need to be had so you can make a decision based on all of the information. You should be able to have all of the information available to you and then make a decision about whether or not it's worth it. For me personally, I don't necessarily think it's been a huge problem. It's kind of amazing how quickly people have adapted to legal marijuana. I mean, you go to a pot store here, it looks like a Blockbuster. It's well lit. They use iPads to describe the various strains of pot. I mean, it is very, very, very sanitized. It's very corporate. And that happened really fast. I mean, really fast. And now, my frustration in Colorado specifically is that I don't think that they have done enough and been aggressive enough to really stamp out the black market, because that was sold to us as, hey, we're going to legalize it, and then there won't be a black market, and there's still a very healthy black market here, and that is a huge problem for me. I don't work in law enforcement. I'm not privy to what they're working on, but I would have hoped that there would have been multiple high-profile, lots of people getting arrested busts by this point, and we've had some, but we certainly haven't had enough to really put a dent in the black market of marijuana.
Mandy, when you talk about, like you said, there's good and there's bad. And also, by the way, just to let people know, we have some callers. We want to try to get them on with Mandy and all of us here. But I kind of wanted to drill down. Is what you're seeing the bad effects, is that primarily – because I agree with you when you say that from a libertarian perspective, do whatever you feel like you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt someone else. Are you seeing that the negative effects are primarily centered on people who are using? In other words, is there spillover to people who are not using? Is there somebody out there who's thinking, hey, I'm not going to use this stuff, but whatever? Are those negative effects confined to people who choose to use, or is it spilling over to people who are not choosing to use?
Well, we have a considerable homeless population now in Denver that was not necessarily as large as it is now. And I will tell you that there are parts of downtown, especially on at night, that I just would not take a kid, that I would not venture down to, simply because we have all of these homeless people. We also now have a really healthy meth problem and a heroin problem at the same time. And I firmly believe, and I have some data to back it up, that because Colorado was a trailblazer in legalizing marijuana, we got a lot of this influx of, and I'm going to call them what they are, they're losers who moved here with no job, no prospects, because they wanted to sit around and smoke pot all day. Right. So is that going to be a problem? problem as other states start to kind of walk down this path? I don't know. I think part of it is that we were first. But that is a significant impact. When you're downtown in Denver any night, when you walk down the street, you're going to smell pot smoke. Right. It's just going to be there. But you're not necessarily going to see people smoke. It's you're not supposed to smoke in public. That is against the law still. Not harshly enforced, but it is enforced. It's one of those things where you're going to have to explain to your kid what that smell is or what that guy over there is doing. But in any big city, you're going to have that conversation probably before you want to about things that your kids are going to see. One thing I will tell you guys, and I hope I don't rain on anybody's parade here, but the marijuana advocates here in Denver have admitted that medical marijuana was just a wedge to get to recreational. And if you look at the statistics of how many people who had these terrible medical conditions that required a medical marijuana card, they were healed when recreational marijuana passed. It was a miracle. They were healed. Doctors all over the place were like, we got to sell tickets or something. I mean, so it really is. Let's be real about what we're talking about, because ultimately the question in my mind should be, should legally aged adults be able to make a choice to buy pot, go home, and instead of maybe having a glass of bourbon, have a bong hit? I mean, that's really what the conversation should be, because that's where it's going to go.
Yes. Mandy Connell on with us on News Radio 840 WHAS, the town hall focusing on medical marijuana, presented by KCC Heating and Cooling. Mandy, do you miss me the most?
You know what? It's so close, Tony, but yes, I do.
Thank you.
Wait, hold on a second. Why?
Shut the show down.
Specifically, why, Mandy? Specifically, why?
Really, the reason why is because he asked first. So
okay.
That was
Thank you.
What the reason was.
Okay,
hey, Mandy.
All right. Now, and as I have in my life, there's a couple of regrets. Is there some Colorado regret in your tone here of legalizing marijuana, I'm hearing?
Yeah. For me, no. It really isn't. And that, I want to be clear about that. I think that the tax money, you guys, oh my God, the tax money. There's so much money flowing in from this. And ultimately, again, I come from a position of freedom. I want you to be able to do that. I mean, I know people that are professionals, they don't drink, but they do go home and they do a bong hit in the afternoon. Like when you go home and have a beer, unwind, that's what they do. And I think that should be well within their rights. I do think that creating this corporate structure that has developed, like I said, really quickly around this industry has kind of pushed some of the bad seeds out a little bit. So as that happens, as the business gets bigger, you're going to see less of the, Grateful Dead wearing hippies that are running these operations, because the operations are getting so big that they can't manage them. So it's getting buttoned up. It's getting more corporate. I think eventually the black market will kind of tamp down, as more states legalize. It'll become less profitable to try and break the law when you can go ahead and walk into a store and buy it anyway.
Right.
But overall, I'd say yeah. I mean, I think it's a positive thing, but I want people to be clear about the drawbacks, because I don't feel like the people of Denver or Colorado were given the full story, But again, even with the full story, I'd say do it, but make sure that you shovel off a lot of money for education for young people, because, people under 21 should not be smoking pot. Some people, 21, probably shouldn't be smoking pot. But there's more and more studies out that say, look, especially for young teenagers, this is a bad idea. And a lot of the teenagers out here have heard this story of, oh, it's just an herb, oh, it's just a weed, oh, it's natural, oh, it doesn't hurt. And they believe that, and it's not true. So it is a chemical. It changes your brain chemistry temporarily or permanently, just like alcohol. And if we're going to have alcohol be legal, I think pot should be legal as well. That's where I stand. I think they should be regulated the exact same way.
All right, while we've got you on the phone here, we're going to take a couple of calls. Let's go, if we still have them here. Lori, you're on News Radio 840 WHAS. Hi, Lori.
Hey, Mandy, I miss you.
Oh, thank you, Lori. I appreciate that.
Well, when you argue with you, Mandy, you don't hang up like Tony does.
Get him, Lori.
Yes, I'm guilty of that. Yes.
My thing is, on all this, I'd like to know which of these legislatures and representatives have money in the CBD oil, and are they abusing the use of their office to tamp down the sales, you know, to keep their money, their
We brought that up. Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah.
Don't hang up on her,
Hang up
Tony.
on Lori. Hang up on Lori.
We did talk about that earlier.
No.
Very healthy.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of CBD products, so it has not impacted that negatively at all.
Interesting, yeah, and that's the thing is, I'm sure there may be some legislators that have that.
There
as a
are,
driving, and I've talked to some people that have told me that the hemp farmers are kind of against medical marijuana because the plan is to grow that in Kentucky, and they see that as a competing crop right now because we're actually exporting hemp right now.
Well, to answer Lori's question, yes, there are most definitely legislators that have CBD stores and interest in CBD oil. I'm not going to go on record on who it is, but yes, some people that are, in fact...
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, big conflict of interest.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Lori. Let's grab another call from Donovan. Donovan, welcome to the town hall.
Hi, guys. Kentucky is not on the even keel as other states are, like Colorado. In other words, at 4 million people in Kentucky, I'm from southeast Kentucky, by the way, near Harlan, the poor part of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that this bill, if you pass it, is actually going to be pretty detrimental to the state of Kentucky. She touched around some of the issues, but the latest facts are there's a 3% increase in car accidents out there, which also correlates into a 54% increase in insurance premiums. And the poor people out in the little parts southeast where I'm from, these people are barely making it as it is. And if you have to increase this, it's kind of unfair to have an overall increase to everyone's premium that don't even do it, don't care about it, whatever. They're going to be able to, they're not going to have a job because they can't afford the insurance to get to work because they want to put a premium on their recreation and I do call it recreation because people can fake just like they do handicap stickers to get their marijuana.
Yeah, but Donovan, isn't your area where you come from also have a pretty bad opioid problem, and there is a benefit to getting off opioids if you can replace that with some medical
I live
marijuana?
in the United States, Tony, and opioid problem is actually everywhere. It doesn't really matter where you're at, you know.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
But
yeah, I agree. I'm just
but I would counter though, Donovan, that we've talked about recreational, but Kentucky is only currently seriously considering medical marijuana. And when you say fake your sticker, this is not the way this bill is set up.
No.
We just had Representative Jason Nemes on. The way this bill is set up is you have to go to a doctor who has to report that you've come to him and report that he has prescribed this to you for specific medical conditions. This is not something you can go in and fake because that doctor's license is on the line.
Yeah, and by the way, the doctor is on the hook, so that's going to prevent people from saying, yeah, I'm a doctor, and just prescribe it for the dollars.
Donovan,
thank you, Donovan.
Thank you, Donovan.
Can I address that insurance thing?
Yes.
Sure.
While I was sitting here listening, I looked at my car insurance has not increased. So I don't know where he gets that car insurance premiums went up 54%. Now
He got that from CNN, Mandy.
All right, that's enough.
Well, and those are also real slow fender benders, so they're not really high-ticket items, right?
Well, you know what's funny is, we've had an increase in auto accidents, but we've also had a huge influx of people moving here for the first time. And when you got new people, they don't know where they're going. So I don't think that the increase in auto accidents is necessarily an indictment. I think there's a lot of other mitigating factors there that kind of get ignored. Like people move out here from another place and don't have good tires. So it's like when there's snow, there's a graveyard on the road of all these cars. So, but my auto insurance premiums have not increased at all. So I don't know where he got that.
Mandy, do you also find that people travel? Because the big thing that I heard when Michigan passed this in the last election, that people are like, oh, that's only 5 hours away. And that now instead of having to drive to Colorado to get this, that they were going to be able to drive to Michigan in 5 hours. Do you see a lot of people driving from other states just to spend a couple hours, go to the dispensary, and then drive home?
It has not hurt our tourism industry at all. I mean, there is a thing in Nebraska and Utah. They call it driving while Colorado. If you have Colorado plates, they will pull you over for something. They'll say, oh, you didn't turn your blinker on before you changed lanes. And they'll pull you over. And then they'll give you the whole, what do I smell? And it's like, I just got a cheeseburger from Burger King, dude. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But there definitely has been a significant number of people that I know that were pulled over leaving Colorado because they had Colorado plates on.
So, how aggressively, Mandy, do they try to keep teenagers from getting a hands on? I mean, it used to be you'd hang out in front of the convenience store, have some old guy buy you a beer. Is it the same kind of thing there?
Well, for the first, 2 years of legalization, they were doing stings on a regular basis on the pot shops. I mean, and as a matter of fact, they just shut down an entire corporation because they were allowing people to buy more than they were allowed to buy in one day. They would let them come back and do multiple transactions. They shut the whole thing down and put people in jail. But the first 2 years, they were not able to buy marijuana with a fake ID anywhere. So the people that are running these operations, they know how much they have to lose, and they are by the book. Now, can kids get pot in Colorado? Absolutely. But they're not getting it from the legal outlets. They're getting it from their older brother, or they're getting it from their parents' stash, or they're getting it from other places that are not necessarily legally, gotten. And as far as the actual legal operations, they are very tight with them. And they're all doing a really good job from what I can tell.
You know, I want to go around the table and phone here. As we kind of wrap this up, because we're getting a lot of social media response. And one of the things that's sticking out to me on social media is that the people that are chiming in are saying, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Mm-hmm. I think I completely slaughtered the name of that diagnosis. My father or grandfather was a Vietnam vet, and this has helped him. We're hearing from people, and I just want to go around the table. We'll start with Mandy and kind of go with everybody. But we're hearing from people who are actually affected positively by this substance when they use it. And to me, I don't know about you guys, but to me that is convincing when I see people come forward and say, I did this and it has helped me. Why should I be a criminal?
Right. I totally agree with that. I know people that were on major painkillers and put on by, say, the VA and have been able to come off all the painkillers because they smoke pot. I know people whose anxiety disorders are in check because they smoke pot. They don't smoke it all the time, but they smoke pot or they use edibles. Most of the time, people will eventually move over to edibles on this stuff because you don't necessarily want to smoke, but you want the effects. So I know a lot of people who have been positively impacted, so much so that doctors out here are now very open to the suggestion. Like, you'll have a doctor say, I can't sleep. They're not going to give you Ambien. They're going to say, well, try a little bit of indica. Find this and try this and try that first. So it's actually preventing people from getting on some of these drugs in the first place.
Have addictions to other substances gone down since pot was legalized?
I don't know if we have any numbers on that, honestly. I don't know if the statistics are readily available on that just because of how loose that system is. I mean, in the homeless people, it hasn't. But I don't know about other, in the general population, what that answer is.
But that could be the same thing you mentioned earlier about the influx of population. If you've got people coming in that are coming in because marijuana is legal there, they may be thinking, well, they're probably bringing a meth addiction or other types of addictions with them, and that's not necessarily tied to the fact that they use marijuana.
Correct.
As we go with the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Mandy, and we'll let you go with this. Look, we're going to be last. We'll be, you guys were one of the first. We'll bring up the rear like we always do, and because it's eventual. All states will probably have this. They got 33, now, so we'll figure it out. Mandy, thank you so much for popping in.
We love you, Mandy.
I miss you guys. Bye.
Oh, bye.
See you, Mandy.
Go eat some gummies. Go eat some gummies.
All right, she's awesome. I love it. Love it.
It's funny because there was a tinge of regret. And I wonder if there'll be, eventually it'll pass in all states, and then there'll be a state that says, you know what, we've had enough.
I didn't see it as a tinge of regret. I saw it as being. I thought she was just being straight up about it.
No,
in the sense that she's saying, look, we've been through this. This is the advantage, I guess, of not being the first to go through this tunnel of fire.
They were experimented.
Yeah, but I can assure you that Jason Nemes, who's sitting here, I've talked to him so many times over the last several months. He is not using this as a wedge issue to get adult, responsible.
He's against responsible use.
Exactly. And I just want to make that very clear because tonight we're focusing on medical.
Mm-hmm.
I personally hold the position of I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home. I totally agree with what Mandy said about that. But as far as medical goes, there is no one that I know that's trying to push that as a wedge issue to get something other than maybe some ancillary groups. So, guys,
Great show.
It was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was very informative. It doesn't look like it's going to get passed in the next 10, 12 days, but maybe next time around. Unless we call.
I'm going to have Dr. Murphy look at this rash before he gets out.
Stop it. Put their pants back on.
Thanks to Dr. Murphy. Thanks to Jason Nemes, Senator Dan Seum, Jr., Dave Jennings.
That's me.
Dwight Whitten, Tony Vendetti. I'm Leland Conway. Maybe I had too many brownies before the show started. News Radio 840 WHAS. And thanks to our sponsors again, KCC Heating and Electrical.
Good night, Mary.
Good night.